Hi, I'm Colleen. Let's do a July wrap up. Hey, I'm Colleen Delaney. If you're new here, this channel is all about books and writing. So hit subscribe and come hang out. For this month, I decided to sort of change my ranking system. I did a video about my book of the month subscription for the past year, and I'll link it in the description if you are interested in that. But I did a different ranking system that I really liked a lot better. Mainly because for stars, I very rarely rank anything 1 or 2 stars because if something's that low, I'm usually just not going to finish it. So instead, I'm going to rank my books as follows. The lowest ranking will be not for me. Those are books that I just didn't enjoy and I was not the correct audience for. Next up will be books that I find okay. These are okay books. I understand why certain people love them. I didn't love them. I got through them. There were parts I enjoyed, but overall, the book was not something I really liked that much. Next will be solid reads. Those are just like through and through good reads that I enjoyed. They're not like my favorite books ever, but I liked reading them. Next is great, which are, as it sounds, books I thought were great. And lastly, the top cream of the crop is put this directly in my veins. So those are books that I can't stop thinking about, books I'm going to recommend like a crazy person to other people, and books I'll maybe reread. So let's get into what I read in July. I didn't read that much in July, and I told myself I wasn't going to read that much in July because I wrote a ton in July. I wrote quite a bit in June. I started writing a book in June. I finished writing that book in July and then started writing another book in July. So I did a ton of writing in July, which definitely cut into my reading time. But I still managed to read 6 books, and they were pretty good. It wasn't like a terrible reading month. It wasn't like the best reading month, but I thought they were pretty enjoyable. I read 3 romance, 1 fantasy, 1 historical fiction, and 1 graphic novel / romance / fantasy, which you probably see behind me on the right and know what I'm talking about. So let's start with the romance. The first romance I read was Beautiful Distractions by Lydia Michaels, and I got an arc of this from NetGalley. And I have this as a solid read. This is like a solid romance contemporary read. The premise is that we've got Mallory, who is a woman who just moved from Philadelphia to a small town, and she has a lot of body confidence issues, and she meets Finn, who at the time has a girlfriend, but they strike off a pretty good friendship right off the bat. Now, if you are a person who is at all sensitive to reading about weight loss, weight obsession, I wouldn't recommend this book for you because that is a huge part of the book is Mallory feeling like she needs to lose weight to be healthy, feeling like she needs to diet and not eat certain things. That was a big portion of the book, which didn't really bother me. There were a couple things that took me out of the story. One being I used to live in Pennsylvania, and I'm very Irish, as you can tell by my name. And there were not a lot of Irish people in Pennsylvania. And this small town in Pennsylvania is completely populated by Irish American people, which was kind of weird to read. There were also 2 things in the epilogue that really bothered me. And these are spoilers, but I am going to say them. So you can skip ahead 15 seconds if you don't want to know any spoilers. One of the spoilers is that in the epilogue, Mallory has a throwaway line about how this woman who had been kind of her rival for Finn's affection has put on weight, and she makes fun of her for that, which I felt was really a horrible, mean line to give the heroine who had such a hard time feeling confident about herself when other people were telling her she was too heavy. The other part, and this is a very big spoiler, is that in the epilogue, Mallory is pregnant with twins. And she's in great shape and working out. And I have been pregnant with twins. And that is just something that I hate in romance novels. If you're going to put a twin or triplet pregnancy, the person who's pregnant should be kind of miserable. It's not fun to be pregnant with twins. It's not. It's terrible. It's not terrible. I'm so thankful I have my daughters and I love them very much. But the pregnancy is definitely the worst part of having twins. I put a triplet pregnancy in one of my books, and I wrote her pretty miserable. So if you want to read about someone being miserable while they're pregnant, check out Only You by Lucy Hudson. Okay, spoiler over. So because of those things in the epilogue, I couldn't put this any higher than solid read, and definitely take care if you are a person who doesn't want to read about body issues because this book is full of them. The next romance I read is The Scandal of It All by Sophie Jordan. This is book 2 in the Rogue Files. I read book 1 in June, and I've got book 3 ready for August. I'm really enjoying this series. So in this one, our main characters are Ella, who's like, full name is like Graciella, I think. And she is the widowed duchess, and her son is Marcus. And Lord Strickland, who is Marcus's best friend. So Marcus is not Ella's biological son. Her husband was married before her, and she is very young and very close in age to both Marcus and Lord Strickland. I think she's supposed to be like only like 35, and they're like 30. So it's not a huge age gap story. But Ella decides she's going to have like one night of fun, and she goes to this masquerade ball, and then she gets in kind of like a bit of a dangerous situation, and Lord Strickland sees her and gets her out of it. But like they kind of have to pretend they're like gonna hook up to get out of it because Marcus is there as well, and she doesn't want him to see her. And usually like friend's step-parent is not something I want to read at all, but for some reason reading it in a historical, it didn't bother me at all. I think it's more like the contemporary setting that bothers me. Like, I don't want to read like a stepdad romance. It's just like not for me. But I did really like this book. Sophie Jordan, I say this like every month because I read one of her books almost every month, is totally a comfort read for me. I can't wait to read the next one this month. As soon as I finish 1 or 2 of the books I'm currently reading, I'll pick it up because they're just like really fun, great, comforting reads to get into. The next arc I read was on my Kindle, and it was called Lay Me Down in Ivy by Stephanie Simpson. And this is another historical, but like very different vein. The subtitle of this, I think, is a femdom romance. If it's not, I'll write out here what the actual subtitle was. So this is in a different time period. This is like Victorian England, not Regency. And it's about the relationship between a man named Ben, whose family has fallen on very hard times and they have to sell the family estate, and a woman, Lady Wickstead, whose first name is Augusta, which we learn throughout the story, who buys their estate. And this is one of those books that has like so much pining. So if you like pining, this book is full to the gills with pining. It also has a marriage of convenience because we get to a point where it makes more sense for Ben and Augusta to get married. Augusta has a lot of demons from her past, and Ben is someone who really, really likes fighting because he loves like the shock and thrill of the pain. So you can kind of see where this is going. This book had a lot of play with like power and like pleasure and pain mixed together, and using sex as like a way to control a small part of your life when your life feels uncontrollable. I'd say this is a solid read. I don't usually read romance like in this particular genre, but I did enjoy it. It has a little bit more of like a dark flavor than a Regency romance just because you are in Victorian England and not the Regency. And obviously the like sexy scenes are definitely more hardcore than your like Avon type historical romance. I say this is a solid read. I enjoyed it. It was fun. And yeah, check out Stephanie Simpson if that sounds like something you'd be into. So moving sort of away from romance, but not really, is the graphic novel I read, which was volume 2 of Lore Olympus. This was great. I mean, I don't really know what else to say. I really enjoy these books. So the pictures are what's best about it, I would say. Like the illustrations are just really cool and really moody. And it's basically dominated by blue, pink, and splashes of red and yellow. But you really just like dive into it. These books are funny because like when I'm reading them, I have to tell myself to slow down because I want to like enjoy the pictures, but I also want to know what happens really badly. This is also one of the few Hades Persephone romances that I enjoy because of being a Greek mythology kid. I have a hard time with that particular pairing because in Greek mythology, Hades is Persephone's uncle and kidnaps her and rapes her. And it's not fun. It's not a fun, sexy time. But this one I'm really liking. It's got an age gap romance, but the age gap is like over 2,000 years and 19. So it feels almost like a vampire type age gap romance rather than a traditional one where it's like, you know, like 40 and 25. So I like that better. And if you've ever wondered how much attention my husband pays to the books I'm reading, I was reading this outside. He came and sat next to me and said, "Do you read comic books?" And I was like, well, I mean, like, this is a graphic novel, but yes, I do. Have you never noticed that I occasionally read graphic novels? Like, okay. All right, let's move to fantasy. I read one fantasy, and it was When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill, and this book was okay. And I was kind of disappointed because I was looking forward to this book a lot. Mainly my review of this book is that I wanted this book to be more. I either wanted it to be more fantasy or more queer teenage romance in the 1950s or more magical realism or more satire. It felt like it was a little bit trying to be too many things, so it didn't really get a strong foothold in any of them. This book also took a really long time to get into, so I would say this book sort of picked up around page 200, which if you're going to read like an 800-page book, I think it's fine if the first 200 pages take a while to get into, but this is a 330-something page book, so that's way too long to get into the book. I think it took me 5 weeks to read the first 200 pages because I just was not interested, and then I read the last 130 in 2 days, which is normal for me. That's kind of slow, actually. So it just wasn't really grabbing me or engaging me. The basic premise is that our main character is Alex, and she's a teenager, and she's lived through the Great Dragoning of 1955, in which a bunch of women turned into dragons and disappeared. And a big part of the book is that, like, the whole world is pretending it didn't happen. And it's clearly an allegory for, like, the beginning of the feminist movement. And a lot of allegory for like queer relationships and love. The thing I didn't like is I felt like there were too many of like the 1950s tropes in here. Like, we have a dad who doesn't care about his daughters. It's like, okay. Which, whatever. I understand like the 1950s were different, but like, I'm going to be really honest. I know my grandfather loved my mom. And there's like a lot of abandonment stuff. And you've got like the mom character who's like so smart. And she could totally get her girls out of this, but she can't because there's something in her way. So that just sort of bothered me. I felt like it was a lot of the characterizations were too expected, which I found kind of annoying. It did feel a bit like a chore to read it. I did like it how it ended, and I will say I do think this has the most beautiful cover of any of the books I've bought this year. So that is something. But I am going to still stick it in my okay section. And lastly, I read one historical fiction, and it is Woman of Light by Kali Fajardo Anstine. And this book was great. And this book was almost up to put it in my veins. But I'm going to keep it at great because I don't know how long it's going to stick with me. We'll see when I do like my year-long review of my books, if I'm still thinking about it in December. The best thing I can say about this book is the writing is superb. You feel like you're there. The descriptions of place and people and feelings are very visceral, and it's gorgeous. It's a multi-generational story of a family living in and around Denver. Some of the generations aren't in Denver, but we spend most of the story with Luce, who's living in Denver in the 1930s, and a lot of it is about her family and how they deal with general racism and very specific racism. At the very beginning of the book, so this isn't really a spoiler, her brother is beaten within an inch of his life by a gang and has to leave Denver. And a lot of the book after that is sort of how she is dealing with the absence of her brother and what it means to be without him suddenly and how her life looks now. Luce is a tea leaf reader also. She's very smart, and she ends up getting a job working for a lawyer named David, who's Greek. We follow her life. It's basically one of those stories where you just sort of like get a snap of someone's life, which I really liked a lot. We see different relationships she has with different men, her relationships with her cousins. There are little kind of vignettes that pop in about her grandfather's life, which were wonderful. And if I could say one critique, I would say I wish we spent a little more time with her grandfather and his family, because I found that part of the book extremely interesting also. That I think was in the 1880s, like the late 1880s, and not in Denver. We're in more like, I mean, it's the 1880s, you're in Colorado, there's like not a lot there right then. I did this morning look up to see what else, I'm hoping I'm not mispronouncing her name, but Kali Fajardo Anstine has written, and she has a collection of short stories that I was like, oh, I think I'm going to see if my library has that when I'm there. I'm going to go to the library in a couple weeks and do a big book haul. And I'm going to check out and see if they have that, because I do think I'd really like reading a collection of short stories she's written, because I really liked her writing style a lot. Great. Maybe put it in my veins. We'll see in December if it moves up. That's my July wrap-up. So not that many books to talk about, and, pretty good. I'd say. I had some solid reads, some greats. Overall, not a bad reading month for the month of July. I hope you had a wonderful reading month in the month of July. Did you read any of these? If you belong to Book of the Month, did you get Woman of Light? Also, if you belong to Book of the Month, have you figured out how to see what book was the most popular? Because I see people talking about that all the time, but I can't find it on their website. And I'd like to see if a lot of people bought Woman of Light or if not. I always think it's interesting to see what book is the most popular each month. And I can't figure it out. If you're still watching, thank you, and please throw me a crashing wave emoji in the comments because it is about 100 degrees out here today, and I'm going to go turn on the sprinkler and cool off for a little while. As always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. See you soon.